am pleased to introduce you to this month's speaker. Abe Saunders serves as the Associate Director for the Center for Student Learning at the College of Charleston. He has 15 years of experience providing support for college students in a variety of settings, including learning centers, advising, counseling centers, and leadership and student success. His professional background and graduate work are in clinical mental health counseling, and college student affairs administration. The slides from today's presentation will be emailed out to you, and we will also be sending out the recording to everyone who registered. Without further ado, Abe, I am going to hand screen control over to you.
All right.
And the floor is yours.
So thank you, Rachel, for the introduction. Thank you to Engineerica for providing us with the space that we can all share for the next hour or so. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. We've got a good bit to cover, so let's get started. For today, our goals, this is what I hope that we can accomplish. First, context. The context is really important to me. I'd like to spend a brief amount of time for us naming some realities that might affect our own well-being at work. So we're going to spend a few moments doing that. And after we do that, we'll take some time to, for you to reflect on your personal views of self-care. Then I want to introduce the construct of self-compassion, what it is and what it isn't. And then we can try to use that as a framework for well-being and self-care in the workplace. And really anywhere that you physically, emotionally, or mentally are, it's going to apply in other realms as well. And then lastly, I want to give us all the opportunity to share some practical ideas of what self-care can look like, hopefully through this lens of self-compassion. All right, in terms of context, to be clear, our time today is not focused on how to support our students or who may be experiencing increased levels of stress and mental health problems right now. But I don't think that we can ignore the impact that our students' mental well-being plays in our approach to our work and how we feel about our jobs. So these next few slides are meant to paint a picture of what students are dealing with, and I suspect much of this is going to align with what you're seeing on your campus. And since we know that helping professionals, many of us are more likely to feel deeply and absorb, take on student stress and distress, and set aside our other priorities to be present with and to support those students, how we react to their distress really does have a potential to negatively impact our longevity and overall satisfaction in our jobs if we're not able to notice it and harness it. And that's a lot of what I want to spend time doing later on after we get through this, grounding it in what's going on for us on our campuses. So again, in terms of context, college student mental health, here's just some data that I want to share of what I know I'm seeing that backs up what I'm seeing and probably what many of you are also seeing on your campus. 35% of first-year students recently reported symptoms consistent with a mental health disorder. The National Collegiate Health Assessment result, most recent one, showed significant increases in the number of college students who report, quote, overwhelming anxiety and depression, suicidal ideation, and self-harm. And then a study that I found really interesting recently was from psychologists at UNC Chapel Hill. They looked at 419 first-year students, and they looked at them in terms of their mental health and their transitions to college. And they started doing this in September, October of 2019. And then COVID-19 hit in March. So they also looked at those students in May of 2020 after the pandemic. And now they're turning this into a longitudinal study. But what they found after COVID hit in March of 2020 was a 40% increase in moderate to severe anxiety with the students, 48% increase in moderate to severe depression, more social isolation, as we could probably assume, and then obviously struggles with online learning. So you can also see that that 35% of first-year students I mentioned before reporting symptoms that are consistent with a mental health disorder. That's an accurate reflection of what's going on during emerging adulthood across the board in the United States, where 40% of persons age 18 to 29 meet the criteria for at least one mental health disorder. Anxiety, depression, substance abuse, those are certainly the three that are most common. It's important to note that this is going to potentially cause very real struggles for our students in terms of transitional periods in their life, going to college, meeting new people, developing interpersonal relationships, and really coming to grips with new normals during COVID, and then what's beyond in terms of where we are with the pandemic or endemic now. And then in terms of context, I think it's also important to certainly mention the that really are students from racial, ethnic, sexual, and gender minority groups on our campuses may be struggling more frequently and with more severity. Some of you may be seeing and experiencing that on campus. So that same UNC Chapel Hill study that I mentioned noted an 89% increase in moderate to severe depression reported for Black and African American students, as well as a dramatic increase in depression and anxiety among sexual and gender minority students. There was a recent study of Black and African American students at one predominantly white institution, and it looked at microaggressions and their impact on mental health for those Black and African American students. And of all the students in the study, the average was over 90 days, they self-reported 291 incidents of a microaggression. So average about 3 or more a day. And they were able to correlate that that was significantly associated with binge drinking behavior and clinically elevated levels of anxiety. So, you know, those last few slides were grounded in research. This last one here is really more anecdotal based on what I've experienced and in conversation with colleagues across campuses nationwide. And that's that we're spending more time supporting students in distress on a daily basis. And that could be students that we have for academic coaching. That can also be our student leaders. If you are here today and you are someone who is a Learning Center director or someone working in a Learning Center, the peer leaders that we're working with are more likely to be experiencing distress right now. And we'll see here how that's causing problems as well in a few minutes. I've certainly seen more students in academic coaching meetings that are grappling with harder things. The issues seem more serious, more complex, more urgent than I've experienced in the past, in the last 10 years that I've been doing academic coaching type work. One of the things that I think is really interesting is I've seen more students who are grappling with meaning of life questions in the context of why they should be motivated to do assignments. Why does all this matter? It's a very existential issues that students are reporting. Students feeling less certain and less confident in their abilities, less likely to know what resources are available on campus to help them. I'm also seeing increased frequency of peer tutors that miss shifts due to being overwhelmed, due to being stressed, calling out last minute, you know, so impacting our work and really making us have to pivot on a you know, more frequent basis in terms of how we manage our tutoring labs. And I'm seeing fewer students who are willing and able to take on peer leadership positions. And part of that is worrying about being overwhelmed. And that causes me in our office to have more holes in what we support and when we can offer support for students and things like tutoring. And then the peer leaders that we do have, those tutors, those SI leaders, may end up taking on more as a result. So with all that, painting that picture, plus the many other aspects of my job, there have definitely been more days in the last year or two where it sort of feels like, if anybody here is a Jurassic Park or a Jurassic World person, this might not be the fantasy location you want to be in here, a bit like raptor wrangling. So which urgent problem do I need to deal with right now? Which is, they're all coming at me at once, right? I'm certainly really blessed to have a dream team of colleagues in our office who are really supportive. We really take care of each other, and that helps immensely. I hope that's the case for all of you listening in today too. But right now, this is the first time I want you to type in the question box, and that is to think about what factors, in addition to what we've talked about in terms of dealing with students in distress, what factors about your job might be affecting your well-being at work. So I'm also going to put some of the ones that I think are going on for a lot of folks, but I'd love to hear right now from some of you what you're seeing.
So while we're waiting for responses to come in, Abe, we had a question come up. It says, in the previous study, is gender minority only non-binary, or does it include, for example, cis females?
Jason, that is a great question. I will send the research. I'll send, actually on the reference list, it has the article. I do not know the answer to that question.
We're seeing some responses come in here.
From the article, I can tell you that I can tell you. Okay, I'm seeing some of these come in. Limited staff, I've seen that a few times. my own sense, whether I'm helping professors and so Catherine, if I'm hearing that right, is it you're not sure to what extent you're able to extend help and extend support, to how much of a difference you're making? I don't know if I'm hearing that right. Yes, okay. Can everyone else see these, Rachel?
No, just us.
Okay, gotcha. There's so many that are coming in, which is I'm very thankful for all of you for sharing. Feeling spread too thin, balancing work with home life, COVID fatigue. Students aren't responding to us coaches. It feels like crickets. Feels like we're not impacting students like we want to. Uncertainty, right? Which uncertainty really is the catalyst for anxiety right there. Budget online or in person, campus closures increases stress everywhere. Staff departures, that's something that we see at our institution quite a bit right now. That whole great resignation really does impact the rest of us who are here. No privacy for students who are facing mental health, anxiety issues. Deborah, thanks for sharing that. That's a really interesting one there, just in terms of your open space and where students can feel comfortable and go. We need more take a care day. Yeah, staff turnover. Okay. We can pass on some of this uncertainty to our students or student users. I'm hearing that from Jason. I think that you might mean in the context of just when we feel uncertain, there might be a trickle down effect. Students feeling hesitant returning to campus. Okay. Yeah, that is. So I think the point here that we can see, and thank y'all all for sharing this. I saw one more question. Will slides and access to the study be shared? Absolutely. As Rachel mentioned before, we will send all this information out. Thank you all for dropping that information into this first question box. And I apologize I didn't get to everyone. I love how many of you were able to share there. And I think that one thing to note here is a lot of what we're experiencing, each of us that I read, others are feeling it too. So I think that's one important thing to note. And certainly, as we can see, there really are stressors that can have a negative impact on our well-being, and over time, our daily functioning. So, and we've all heard self-care is important, right? So here's our first chance today for some real self-reflection. How do you view self-care? So do you see yourself more like this? Does it feel like this for you? Where if you look at this whole thing we're looking at here, these are all the things I've got to do today or this week, right? And look down at the bottom of that list. Practice self-care. It's almost this thing of another to-do list item. Someone told me I should do this. You know, I see all these articles about the importance of self-care. So therefore, it's supposed to be good for me, but really I don't have time for it. Or, you know, it just feels like an obligation. You know, does that fit for you in terms of how you view self-care? Or, you know, do you feel more like fall in line with this? I really know I need more time right now. I need time right now to rejuvenate, right? And I'm going to take it. So we're all going to fall somewhere between that spectrum in some capacity, I'm sure. So what we're going to do now is I have a quick poll for you with 5 items, and really just I want you to just choose which perspective on self-care best describes you. Rachel, do you mind driving that poll?
Yep, one sec here. Oh, Nick got it for me. He was quicker with his mouse.
So again, the question is, which perspective on self-care best describes you? I consistently prioritize self-care. I value it, but I usually put it off. I value and promote self-care for others, but I don't prioritize it for myself. I would like to prioritize self-care, but it often ends up feeling like an obligation. And then self-care, who has time for that? So let's see what we got.
We've got 80, 82, 83% of attendees have voted.
Yeah. Rachel, remind me, can everyone see the results yet, or?
Not yet, not until we close the poll and share them.
Okay.
But we are seeing some pretty clear
Right.
majorities. 87%, 88, 89, wow. All right. Do you want me to keep it open, or we have 90%?
I think that's, Rachel, I think that's good. We can close it up.
Okay. I'll give it a few more seconds, unless anyone else wants. Okay, and I am going to go ahead and close it now. And we will, do you want me to go ahead and share the responses?
That'd be great, Rachel. Thank you.
Here we go. So yeah, for some pretty clear results.
Right. The two top ones I value, self-care, but I often put it off until absolutely necessary. And then the highest, I promote it for others, but I don't prioritize it for myself. And I can say I am not at all surprised by those numbers, particularly that promoting it for others, but not prioritizing it for myself. I completely see, especially with our group of helping professionals, that certainly would be the case. So thank y'all for participating in that poll, and I encourage you to take some time and think about, about what that means in terms of those of you who, in terms of your perspective on self-care. That's what we're gonna, we're using this as a launching point to talk about a construct called self-compassion. So what if we were to prioritize self-care from this place of self-compassion, that we're worthy and we need self-care, we need restorative activities in our life, and we need those on a regular basis, that we can be in tune with ourselves, and that we can have just that right amount of facing our stress, acknowledging it, feeling it, and doing something healthy about it rather than over-identifying with it, rather than avoiding it completely. Either of those two behaviors can be really problematic. So that's what I've learned, and I'm still trying to practice, is this notion that self-compassion is actually, for me, and I would imagine for lots of folks, a path to being more present, more efficient, and actually giving more quality effort in our work. I read an article that cited a statistic in the UK recently that workplace mental health problems resulted in 16 million lost working days in a single year, which was a 40 billion pound hit to employers, 25 billion pound hit to the government. And the UK has that reputation of being like, keep calm and carry on, right? So compared to the UK, I can only imagine how workplace mental health problems is affecting employees and employers here in the US, particularly in the COVID era. But that study I read, like many others, were pointing to this psychosocial construct of self-compassion as a really critical component of a healthy employee and a healthy person. So let's talk about this construct of self-compassion. It's rooted in a Buddhist principle that a person really must have compassion for the self if they're going to truly have the emotional capacity to extend compassion for others. Until about 20 years ago, I didn't have any real empirical evaluation until an educational psychologist whose name is Kristen Neff, I think she works at University of Texas, Austin. She did a deep dive into this construct, and she created a self-compassion scale, which is what Rachel had emailed out to those of you who had already registered a day or two ago, and that I was encouraging you to take. We'll revisit that here in a little bit. But it's gained a great deal of traction, especially in the last 10 years in Western culture. There's been thousands of research studies that have applied the principles of self-compassion to workplace environments and in really all areas of our life. So let's talk about what self-compassion is, what it looks like, and also, just as importantly, what it isn't. So the way Neff has described it in her research is that we are touched by our own distress. We're touched by our own suffering. We can stop and realize our own pain. And that's really a mindfulness piece right there, that we're in touch enough to where when something's going wrong, when we're stressed, when we're worried, we recognize that it's happening without being overwhelmed by it. We actually want well-being for ourselves. We believe we're worthy of it. We feel motivated to heal. We can accept that we have limitations and imperfections, and that's where we are in the moment, because everyone has limitations and imperfections. We have a kind and understanding attitude towards ourselves on a consistent basis. Our personal experiences are a representation of the human experience, that we don't necessarily feel like I'm the only one who's struggling at work. I'm the only one who has struggles when students are struggling. It's usually not the case, right? Usually most of us are struggling, right? We all have those moments. So really it's this acknowledgement that what I'm feeling is a representation of what the human experience is. And part of the human experience is that there are times that are hard, right? We all have those. And then we have this ability to take the position of the other towards ourselves. So this circles all the way back around to that poll where 38% of us said that I promote self-care for others, but I don't prioritize it for myself, right? And that's one of the key components of self-compassion, is that we can think that we deserve something the same way we would tell a friend or a colleague or a partner or a family member, all right? So, I'm just pausing for a second in case, Rachel, I don't know if there's going to be any questions.
There haven't been any questions for you, but we just we've had a couple questions about the slides, and I mentioned this at the beginning, but I know a few people joined late, so it's not a problem. We will be emailing out the slides, or I actually just uploaded them to the handouts tab, and you should be able to download them that way. But if you're unable to see it, or if you're watching this later, we will make that also available on our website.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Okay, so this is what self-compassion is. And in Neff's work, she definitely makes some differentiations between what self-compassion is and what it isn't. And I think there are three that are really important in the context of the work that we do, and probably in our own personal lives too. But one is that self-compassion is not self-pity. You know, there's a strong distinction between those two. Self-pity is more aligned with, I'm so self-involved with my own problems that I don't recognize what other people's problems are, which is, as you can see, is completely different from, you know, this feeling of common humanity where I have stressors, I feel pain, it's part of the human experience, and I recognize that others have that too. Self-compassion is not self-indulgence. I think a lot of folks worry that if I practice self-compassion, then I can easily get to a place where I'm self-indulgent, where I can say, oh, I'm feeling really stressed today, so I'm just gonna go sit on the couch and have a 6-pack of beer, or sip that scotch, or eat, you know, 2 tubs of ice cream or something like that, and then to do that on a regular basis, right? That's actually not really that close to what self-compassion is, because that's really focused on short-term rewards, which can be unhealthy behaviors for us, things like alcohol and other drugs, overeating, being a couch potato on a really daily basis. Those are just examples. But self-compassion requires us to do things that are hard, and that we're willing to do those things that are hard because we love ourselves. Those are things like exercising, quitting a bad habit, adopting a meditation practice. Those things that have long-term benefits, but really do require a lot of dedication on our end. So that's a big difference there. And the last one is self-esteem. Self-compassion is not self-esteem. Self-esteem is a good thing, but at least in Western culture, it's attached to self-comparison a little bit too much. So, you know, do I stand out amongst the crowd? Am I a better colleague? Am I a harder worker than someone else? Self-compassion doesn't have strings attached to it. Self-compassion doesn't say, I can only be kind to myself today if I nail this presentation, or if I finish this project, right? So just to summarize those three, or summarize what self-compassion is, there are 3 components that you can really break it down into, and that is self-kindness. Self-kindness is the ability to be kind and understanding to yourself, the way that we often are to our friends, to our colleagues, to our loved ones. That sense of common humanity that I mentioned. Acknowledging that mistakes, failures, stress, pain, that's all part of the human experience. This allows us to not feel isolated and believe that we're the only one having a hard time at work, like I said, or the only one feeling burnout. And then lastly, mindfulness, the ability not to avoid our pain, to face our pain, to face our worry and our stress, and at the same time not get overwhelmed by it, to be present, to be in the moment, to notice how we're feeling without judgment or without criticism. So how self-compassionate do you feel that you are? If you took the test, that 26-item test ahead of time, I would love if you're willing to, if you would mind sharing either your reactions to taking the test, what maybe you learned from it, if anything, or if it just reaffirmed some things you already knew. Or, you know, if you want to, you can certainly share results as well. I'm going to pull over this browser that has the score interpretations. Can everyone see that? Rachel, can we see that? And I pulled it over.
Yep.
Okay. Kendra's high on self-compassion. That's great. Any other reactions or thoughts about the test? Anything that stood out to you? Some high ones on here. Stephanie's saying that there's been certainly changes over the years in how she's done, and she's actually done a lot better on this than in years past. Coming to terms with an ADHD diagnosis has been a big part of it. Stephanie, thanks for sharing that, because I think acceptance over things that we may have to struggle with in life really is an example of self-compassion, right? That's great. Moderate room for improvement with a 3.5. Some 2s in there. Some folks that are really high in being self-compassionate. Okay, so I'm seeing some moderate and a high. That's really good. That's a great place to be, y'all. I'm curious, with those numbers, I'm curious what, for some of you that scored high, so high being 3.5 to 5, did any of you there select in the poll, I promote self-care for others but don't prioritize it for myself? I'm just curious there, because that seems we're having a lot of high numbers, but we didn't have as many folks that said I consistently prioritize self-care in the poll. Tendency to prioritize physical health but not mental health. Okay. Yeah, okay, good. Well, thank you all for those of you who took the test. If you didn't get the test, it might have been that you registered for the webinar after Rachel sent it.
Yep, I am going to put the I did have somebody ask about that, so I am going to put the URL in the response so that people can take it later if they would like to.
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing. All right, so there's thousands of research studies at this point that have identified the mental and physical health benefits in individuals who possess those higher levels of self-compassion. So those of you, particularly those of you who did score high, hopefully you've experienced some of these. So I'm just going to share what some of these are. So in terms of, you know, benefits of self-compassion, research has shown increased life satisfaction, happiness, optimism, increased curiosity, which I think is huge for us, because I'm sure all of us here on this call are lifelong learners, right? And being able to harness that curiosity in a way that is restorative is really key. This physical health, when it's linked to a peer-reviewed journal article I read recently, but in terms of physical health, there was a study published 5 months ago involving women aged 45 to 67 years old, and they found that those women who practice self-compassion have a lower risk for cardiovascular disease. On the other side, feeling less depressed, feeling less anxious, less fear of failure, less social comparison, self-consciousness, less stress, right? Angela, thanks for sharing. So if we translate all this into and into also benefits of self-compassion at work, you know, being able to recognize when we're stretched too thin, didn't perform a task to the best of our ability, or that we made a mistake at work, allowing ourselves to feel that with self-kindness, with common humanity, with mindfulness. If we're able to do that, we're more likely to adopt this realistic self-concept. We're more likely to accurately assess our strengths and limitations, and in turn less likely to view the journey of self-improvement as any kind of threat. We're more likely to operate from a growth mindset, open to this idea that our goals can be accomplished through hard work, through diligence, through commitment. We're less likely to have negative thoughts about ourselves and our abilities. We experience more intrinsic motivation. We feel rewarded by the work we do more often when we come at it from a place of self-compassion. Self-compassion begets compassion. It encourages us to be compassionate for others. And the good news is that this also works the other way around, where if we are compassionate towards others, that's a good place to be, because it shows that we certainly have the capacity to extend that compassion to ourselves. And then lastly here, we're also better at receiving feedback from students, from our supervisors, from our colleagues, and we're also more comfortable, better at giving feedback as well to those who need feedback, students, those that we supervise, and others that are our colleagues. All right, I'm getting ready to switch gears for the last bit of time we have. This is where we're going to talk about tips and strategies, and this is going to be tips and strategies that I have that I think are important based on self-compassion, and I want y'all to be able to share for the good of the group those that y'all are practicing, because I think that collectively all of us can benefit from our time together in that way. Before I do that, Rachel, just wanted to check in. Is there anything in the question box that needs to be addressed right now?
It does not look like we have any other questions that have come in yet.
Okay. All right. So, like I said, moving on, with the time remaining, I want us to have time to share what you currently do to integrate self-care into your daily life, or things that you would like to do. And like I said, one of those major tenets of self-compassion is, why can't we treat ourselves like we would a friend who's struggling? So that's one of the first things to think about, is to believe that you're worthy of self-care. Think about when you're stressed out, being mindful of how you're feeling and saying, what would I tell a friend in this situation? How would I encourage them to do what they needed to do to take care of themselves? What kind of support would I extend to them? And turn that in on yourself. Kristen Neff on her website has self-compassion exercises that you can do at work. You can do them at home. They can range anywhere from like 5 minutes to 30 minutes. And this is hyperlinked here, so you can see them. A lot of them are mindfulness practices that are self-guided or guided by her, one of the two. Okay. And then practicing compassionate mindfulness. So there's so many ways that you can adopt mindfulness practice. It doesn't have to be meditation as most of us conceptualize what meditation is. There's so many other things that we can do, and this bullet point list isn't even close to everything that you can do. But there's so many different types of breathing practices, deep breathing, square breathing, so many that you can look into trying. Guided imagery practices, which often go along with breathing practices. Encouraging self-talk, body scan activities and exercises, where you're using your senses and noticing how you're feeling and going through your body parts of how you're feeling, what you're feeling, and just being in the moment with that. Journaling, I think that's really helpful for a lot of folks. So is that something that you can do on a daily basis, to talk about what you're experiencing that day and why, and what it is that you appreciate about yourself? And speaking of journaling, there's something called the safe pill exercise that I think is really important. I just did this the other day, actually. What I liked about it was it gave me permission for just a moment to identify a behavior or a trait or a feeling that I wish would go away if I just had a safe pill, right? That it could just be eliminated. And then I have to name what I would lose though if I lost that behavior, that trait, or that feeling. So examples might be, I wish I wasn't so stubborn about asking for help. But then you might say, like, that you would also lose capacity for resilience if you lost that, right? So for me, when I did that, I think one of the ones for me was, I can oftentimes get in this cycle where I worry or ruminate too much about something or focus too much on something. So I may worry about my son. I might worry and kind of catastrophize at times what might happen. And then I let that, I focus on that fear and that concern. And I want that feeling to go away because it doesn't feel good. But with that exercise, I also said, okay, well, if I lost that worry, that rumination, might I also lose this capacity for imagination that I have? And imagination could be for good. So it allowed me to recognize that gifts I have or traits I have, or that gifts come along with certain traits, right? And that's an act of self-compassion. So having a new perspective might be a way for you to understand that you can harness aspects of your trait for good, right? That, whatever causes you to be stubborn, as an example, isn't going to go away. But maybe we can catch ourselves and appreciate why we're being stubborn, and maybe we can sort of tap that down a little bit and also appreciate that that is one of those things that gives us resilience. If that makes sense. So that was a really important mindfulness exercise for me recently, so I wanted to share that with y'all. Laugh at yourself, particularly, and when things go wrong, try to find humor in the shared human experience of things when they're not going well. And then ask your colleagues to help you at work. So when Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas, he'd say, if you see a turtle sitting on top of a fence post, chances are it didn't get there by itself. And I think for me, what that means is we all need help. And sometimes that vulnerability that you share with colleagues can strengthen your relationship with them. And that's only for good long term. And just relating to like asking for help, here's a fun fact. Oxytocin, which is the love hormone or the cuddle hormone, well, that's actually a stress hormone. So when you're feeling stressed at work, your pituitary gland is pumping out oxytocin. And we should listen to that because that's our body's way of biologically telling us to tell someone how we're feeling and to tell someone why we're struggling. If we don't do that, or if we don't practice mindfulness or self-care, those stress hormones are probably going to get released somehow else. It might be in the form of behaviors that we don't want to be doing, right? It might cause us to lack more focus. It might cause those feelings of panic, right? So these things we've mentioned, they're all meant to be soothing techniques, healing techniques, again, through that lens of self-compassion. There's so many that can fall into this category. So that's what I want to do right now is turn it over to y'all and share with the group what practices that you use to soothe and heal. Like, what are your go-to self-care strategies? I'm going to read off as many as I can that come in.
I like this comment by Jason that came in a little bit ago. Each day, ask myself how much I can truly accomplish during the day. If one particular day is low, don't feel guilty about it, but do examine what you can do about in the future to improve it. More generally, take time off without feeling guilty for doing so. And remember that my best work isn't working to burn out.
Jason, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Catherine saying in her office, putting on a 2 to 5 minute meditation. Excellent. When I'm dealing with anxiety, stepping back and asking why I'm anxious about it. Yeah, so being curious, right? Not coming from a place of judgment. Journaling, nature therapy, haiku and poetry, animal therapy, all those are awesome. Taking a walk, absolutely. That's so important, just to be able to step away, to physically and mentally and figuratively remove yourself from a situation. Plan vacations. Oh yeah, something to look forward to. I'm always in a better mood if I know I've got something to look forward to, for sure. Pressing my hand on my chest really helps me feel grounded and less anxious. Listening to daily wellness playlists on Spotify. Caroline, the workbook for self-compassion has a lot of those, a lot of what you shared with mantras that go along with it that can be really helpful. Breathing. Surfing analogy that work is like riding a wave. Sometimes it peaks, sometimes it glides. You have to learn how to ride the wave. Walking 2 to 3 times a day alone and with the team as a way to connect personally and professionally. Finish each day and be done with it. Quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Listening to music when that doesn't work. Saying something, I talk and walk with someone positive. Yeah, use folks around you, right? Absolutely. Volunteering. Reading and listening to books. Great. Playing guitar, puppy hugs and kisses fix everything. I can't disagree with that, Vanessa. Okay, cat therapy, more animal therapy stuff. Aquariums on the science floor of our college. Go visit the fish on a 10-minute walk. The water gurgling sound is calming. Yeah, so using your sensory, that sensory mindfulness is so relaxing and so grounding for sure. Awesome, thank y'all for sharing those. Rachel, will the question box, will it be saved for an amount of time to where I could collect all these and create a list to share out with folks?
Yeah, we can, I can send you those.
That's fantastic, thank you. Okay, I want to be mindful of our time. We've got just a few more minutes left, and we're really at that point where we can wrap up. I've got a few more self-care tips that I think could be really useful in the workplace environment. Some of these are going to be things that would be applicable for you. Some may not, depending on what your work environment looks like, what the structure of your organization is or your institution as a whole. So, and I believe, I can't remember who said this, but I noticed it early on. It might have been Stephanie Craven, maybe, but someone had mentioned that self-care is important, and that it seemed like the institution that you work for says that it's important, but then there's no follow through, or it doesn't feel like that it really actually is. I don't know who said that, but at any rate, so, and side note here, Caroline, you mentioned a workbook, but I couldn't remember where it was. I actually have an image of it that I'm going to show you here in just a few minutes. But back to that point, in terms of, does the institution really care? To some extent, I wonder if it's okay for us to give ourselves permission to assume that maybe our institution, or if we work for a state institution, maybe the state, what if they don't care? What if they care about just getting the job done, and they only care about our health and wellness when, oh, we definitely burnt you out, you're gone now, or you're, that sort of thing. And I don't mean to say that as a grim thing. It's more of a, okay, if I was operating with this assumption that the institution maybe doesn't care about me, the individual, what does that free me up to really look for? Do I need to lean more on my colleagues then? Are we more in that together to take care of ourselves? Do I need to practice self-compassion as an act of defiance in that sense, right? Are there things that we can do from a way to harness that into something that's healthy for us, right? And I don't know the answer to that, and whoever mentioned that at the beginning, I don't know exactly what your situation is, but that's something that I've kind of come to grips with, is, maybe, what if the state doesn't care? You're using taxpayer dollars, Abe, so do your job, and I don't know, but speaking of that, like, if there are employee assistance resources at your institution, make sure you know what those are. Sometimes they really are going to be minimal, but sometimes there's some stuff that you might be surprised that's offered. You might find that you get 5 or 6 free counseling sessions from your employee assistance resources, things like that. Learn about wellness initiatives on your campus, and then where there might be gaps. if you have the energy and time, I know this is another rock to your rucksack, but again, from a place of self-compassion, is this something where you do it because this is going to be important for you and it's going to help you be more productive? But can you create or advocate through either a staff advisory committee or your human resources to implement some wellness initiatives on campus? You know, maybe if you have a counseling center on your campus, if they are doing mindfulness groups for students, you know, even though that's their focus, could they do a mindfulness group for staff? And could you participate in that? Our VP of Student Affairs on our campus does, I believe monthly, but she does yoga sessions and invites anyone, faculty, staff, or students who want to come, as an example. Take a wellness inventory. One that I really like is the 5-factor wellness. This one does cost a little bit of money, but it's really comprehensive. It has so many dimensions and domains of wellness that you can dig into, and then use those results to see where you have a deficit in wellness, and do that from a place of self-compassion though. So identify a goal or maybe a 30-day challenge to do something that will help you in that area of wellness that you feel like you need help with or that you can improve upon. This could be something great to do with a friend, with a partner, with your colleagues. And that leads me to this next one. If you're lucky to have caring colleagues around you, engage in staff development activities that are restorative, that strengthen your bond and your trust with each other. Maybe y'all take a wellness inventory together and do a 30-day challenge with each other and hold each other accountable and celebrate each other's successes in that regard. We're doing our staff planning meeting for our staff next week, and we're doing it for the marine biology majors. They have a marine science lab on one of the islands in the Charleston area. So we're going there, and it's going to be wonderful to be able to just get out of our offices and go to that space together, sit out with a large window view of the water, and then when we're done, we're going to take kayaks out together. So we're, you know, again, something to really look forward to at work, and just something as a memory that we can all do together. So one thing I think also is really important is, you know, as learning center professionals and other faculty and staff in higher ed who are on today's webinar, you're probably lifelong learners. So use your passion and use your love for learning as a restorative practice as much as you can. Engage in activities that are going to continuously sharpen that love and make you stay engaged and make you stay curious. So prioritize that book or that video that you want to. Summertime might be a really good time to do that. So looking at membership and maybe leadership roles in professional organizations, creating group meetings with like-minded colleagues. I know there's quite a few folks that have done that, and I see it on the Learn Assist listserv as well. So those are some things. And then lastly, maybe perhaps consider this whole construct of self-compassion as a type of professional development. Maybe you're at a place right now where budget constraints don't allow you to travel to professional conferences. Maybe if that's the case, maybe this year you can explore the benefits of self-compassion and apply them to your professional life. And that could be an excellent professional development goal for the year for you. You talk with your supervisor about that and explain why that could be a beneficial use of your time. So those are just some more tips. Last thing before we close out in terms of resources, there are so many resources out there. So I'm just going to share a few that are personally helpful for me that I've used. So it doesn't mean that they're going to be exactly what you need, but they can certainly be a place to start. So with this slide, most of these you can see here are going to be hyperlinked. So when you get the presentation, you can see where this goes. Someone mentioned about the workbook. So this isn't hyperlinked, but you'll see it here, the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook and the Highly Sensitive Person. I'll talk about that in a second too. But the Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook is about Neff's work. So it's a place for you to explore self-compassion, but then look at activities for how you can create it. And it goes into things like the resistance that we often feel because, you know, whatever our homeostasis is, even if it's not always working for us, we want to stay there. Our brain wants to stay there because it's comfortable. We know it. So she acknowledges that in the work. And she acknowledges, okay, you're going to have some resistance. You're going to have some, quote, backdraft, as it's called in the book. But what are the ways that you get through that, and how can we get through that together? These apps that you see, one's called I Clear It. It's a mindfulness app. Rainy Mood. I love listening to Rainy Mood. Again, someone mentioned like the bubbles in the aquarium. Listening to the rain really calms you down. Nature Space is great. All three of those are free apps. And then, like I said, Kristen Nev has a lot of resources that are free on her website related to self-compassion. So you can do a deep dive there if you want to as well. I do want to point out really quickly that Highly Sensitive Person book. About 15 to 20% of humans, 15 to 20% of dogs, 15 to 20% of monkeys, lots of more advanced animals have this trait of sensitivity, and it's meant to be something that helped us survive over time. You have to have people who are hypersensitive who can watch out for danger, dogs who are hypersensitive that can watch out for the pack, right? So this book is all about this notion that being a sensitive person isn't inherently good or bad, but it is what it is. And there are ways to harness that trait. And I bring this up because even though 15 to 20% of the adult population have that trait, a significantly higher percentage of folks who are teachers, other educators, counselors, those type of work fall into this category and have this trait. This book really, for me, helps capture what are the strengths of being sensitive, and knowing where your sensitivity makes you tired or makes you have this depth of processing. So again, just understanding that trait and then kind of coming at it from a place of self-compassion can be really important for some of us who might have that trait along in your journey of why you might feel things more intensely than other folks feel. If you feel like you're more of a intuitive person or more of a feeler than those around you, that book might explain why. So I wanted to share that as well. So as a way to conclude, I want to reiterate that self-care is important, but why we choose to take care of ourselves makes a real difference. So doing it from a place of self-compassion is going to lead to more fulfillment, more motivation, and overall wellness. It also allows us to extend compassion to others, as we mentioned already. And then I think lastly, this last quote suggests, perhaps most importantly, that self-compassion allows us to realize that we're all in this together. So that's what I want to end with, that we are all in this together. And I appreciate your time, your participation today, and please be well. Those of you who are hanging on for a few minutes, I'm happy to answer any more questions. I'm going to go back to the beginning slide because it has my contact information. I know that y'all have. I know that this is going to be shared with you, but I just wanted you to, if you needed to jot that down, you're welcome to send me an email as well. I saw a few folks here who made some comments that I didn't get a chance to address, but if I'm able to get your contact information, I might reach out to you individually and talk with you more, because there are some that I saw that were really curious and that I really appreciated you sharing. So I just couldn't see and catch everything as we were going through.
All right, and just a reminder to those of you still with us, you can download the slides in the handout section, and we will also email those with the recording, and we will make them available on our website. All right, I don't think I see any. Oh, here we go. We have a question from Trisha. She says, do you think personality style affects how we prioritize self-care, such as, for example, for introverts versus extroverts?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know all the ways that would be the case, but as an example with introvert versus extrovert, I 100% think that. I think that introverts are more likely to need to process the day, right? And so you might have colleagues for self-care who want to go for happy hour, and then you might have a colleague who says, I just need to go home and process the day and walk my dog and just be with myself. And I think that's one big difference there. That book, The Highly Sensitive Person, I think that within that explores personality traits too. And it's like about 20 to 30% of people who have that high sensitivity trait are extroverts, and the other 70 to 80% would be introverts. Mm-hmm. So I think there's definitely some significant differences there in terms of your personality and how you do self-care.
Yeah. And Sandra asks, When you talk about self-care as defiance, do you suggest that we worry less about how supervisors or colleagues view us in order to have the self-care we need?
I need to think about that. That is a good question. I think that worrying less about how your supervisors and your colleagues view us is in and of itself a really healthy thing to do. You know, in some ways, I think a clear conscience makes for a soft pillow. You know, if we are doing our job and doing it well, I think that's really key. And I think that being able to then just say, okay, well, for me, practicing self-care is going to make me a better employee. And really, it might be a situation where colleagues start to jump on that and say, hey, this is right. This is this is the way to go. I appreciate that question, Sandra.
I can give it another minute and then we can close out if we don't have any other questions coming in. We thank you all for joining us today. Nick, if you can move to the last slide in that presentation. I think it's just the next one. Yeah. So that's, if you do have any questions later on, you can contact Abe, or you can also contact me, and I'm happy to pass on any questions. And again, as a reminder, when we do close out the session, you'll be redirected to a poll, and we definitely appreciate your feedback. So with that, I think we are going to wrap up, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here, and Abe, thank you so much for sharing your presentation with us. And we hope that you all have a great rest of your day, and that you are going to go out and practice some great self-care, because you deserve it. And have a great rest of your day, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.